My father's hand was still in the air when I realized he'd just thrown money at me like I was a beggar on the street corner. The $5 bill floated down in slow motion, spinning once, twice, before it landed between us on the hardwood floor of the living room. Christmas music played softly from the radio on the kitchen counter. Silent night. How ironic. Because this night was anything but silent, and what I was about to do would shatter whatever fragile piece my father thought he still controlled. He stood there in his flannel shirt and worn jeans, face red from the whiskey he'd been nursing since noon, eyes cold and empty as a frozen lake. Behind him, the Christmas tree blinked with lights my grandmother Eleanor had strung up 3 days ago, back when she still believed this birthday might be different. Back when she still had hope. "I regret sending you to high school," he said, each word falling like a hammer on glass. "Biggest mistake I ever made. Wasted 4 years of my money on you. Get out. Get out of my house." I didn't move. I just stared at that crumpled bill on the floor, watching it settle into the groove between two floorboards, and I felt something break open inside my chest. Not sadness, not even anger, something colder, something I'd been carrying for 3 years and 27 days, waiting for exactly this moment. Do you know what it feels like when someone you're supposed to love looks at you like you're garbage, like you're less than nothing? Comment below if you've ever felt that, because what I did next changed everything. My grandmother stood in the doorway to the kitchen, flowers still dusting her hands from the birthday cake she'd been decorating. She'd made it from scratch. Chocolate with vanilla buttercream, my favorite since I was 6 years old. 17 candles sat in a small box on the counter, waiting to be lit. Waiting for a celebration that would never happen. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Just a small, broken gasp. She looked at my father, then at me, and I saw something flicker across her face. Recognition, maybe, or fear. Like she knew what was coming even before I reached into my pocket. "Pick it up," my father said, gesturing at the money with his boot. "Take your $5 and get out. That's all you're worth to me. That's all you've ever been worth." The Christmas lights blinked. Red, green, gold, red, green, gold. The pattern repeated endlessly, casting shadows across his face that made him look older than his 43 years. Made him look like a stranger. But then again, he'd been a stranger for a long time. I bent down slowly and picked up the bill, smoothed it flat between my fingers. The paper was soft and worn, like it had passed through 100 hands before landing in mine. I could smell the faint scent of tobacco and motor oil on it. My father's smell. The smell of the garage where he spent most of his time, hiding from a family he never wanted. Before I continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe, because what happens when I hand him that envelope will leave you speechless. I folded the $5 bill once, twice, 3 times, until it was small enough to fit in my palm. Then I looked up at him. Really looked at him. At the broken capillaries in his cheeks. At the way his hairline had receded in the past year. At the calluses on his knuckles from years of working with his hands, building things for other people while letting his own family fall apart. "Thank you," I said quietly. His eyebrows pulled together. Confusion. Suspicion. He hadn't expected gratitude. He'd expected tears, shouting, maybe even begging. That's what he wanted. A reason to feel powerful. A reason to feel like he still had control over something in his miserable life. "What?" he said. I said thank you. I slipped the bill into my jacket pocket, then reached into my other pocket and pulled out the envelope. It was pale yellow, the kind you buy at the post office for important documents. The edges were worn from being handled too many times, from being opened and opened again on nights when I needed to remind myself why I was doing this, why I was waiting. My father's eyes dropped to the envelope. I watched his face change, watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched his fingers curl into fists at his sides. He knew that handwriting on the front. He'd seen it before, a long time ago, before he made her disappear. "Where did you get that?" His voice was quieter now, shaky. The whiskey confidence was gone, replaced by something raw and animal. Fear. Pure, undiluted fear. If you've ever held on to a secret that could destroy someone, you understand why my hands weren't shaking when I held that envelope. But if you want to see the exact moment his world collapsed, you need to subscribe right now. Because what happens next will prove that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. Hit that subscribe button. I didn't answer. I just held it out to him. My grandmother made a small noise in the doorway, a whimper, or maybe a prayer. I couldn't tell. She took a step forward, one hand reaching out like she wanted to stop what was happening, but her feet stayed frozen to the kitchen tile. "Take it," I said. My father's hand trembled as he reached for the envelope. His fingers brushed mine for just a second, and I felt how cold they were. How clammy. Like he was already sick with whatever truth waited inside that sealed paper. He turned it over in his hands, studying the writing, the way the letters looped and curved, the way the ink had faded slightly over the years but was still perfectly readable. Then he looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Panic. "What is this?" he whispered. "Open it," I said. "No. Tell me what this is first." I smiled then. Not a cruel smile. Not a happy one either. Just a smile that said, "I know everything, and you can't hurt me anymore." "I know," I said simply. And then I walked past him toward the window, the one that faced the street, the one with the thin white curtains my grandmother had hung last spring, embroidered with small yellow flowers. I pulled the curtain aside just enough to let the light from outside spill into the room, just enough for him to see what I wanted him to see. My father's head snapped toward the window. I watched his reflection in the glass, watched his eyes go wide, watched his mouth fall open, watched the envelope slip from his fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud. "No," he breathed. "No, that's not possible." But it was possible, because parked directly across the street, engine running, headlights cutting through the falling snow, was a car he recognized. A 1987 Buick LeSabre. Pale blue, rusted along the wheel wells, a crack in the passenger side window that had never been fixed. And sitting in the driver's seat, visible through the windshield, was a woman with silver hair pulled back in a loose bun. A woman with my eyes. A woman he told me was dead. My grandmother Eleanor gasped. Actually gasped. A sharp, broken sound that filled the whole room. She pressed both hands over her mouth and sank down onto one of the kitchen chairs, her legs giving out beneath her. My father stumbled toward the window like a man walking through deep water. His hands hit the glass hard, palms flat, fingers spread wide. His breath fogged the pain. "That's not her," he said, voice cracking. "That's not her. That's impossible. She's gone. She's been gone. I made sure she was gone." "You made sure," I repeated softly. "That's an interesting way to put it." He whirled around to face me, and for a second I thought he might lunge, might grab me by the shoulders and shake me until I took it all back, until I admitted this was some cruel joke. But he didn't touch me. He just stood there, shaking, literally shaking like a man in the grip of fever. "What did you do?" he whispered. "What did you do?" I picked up the envelope from where it had fallen, smoothed out the corner that had bent when it hit the floor. Then I held it out to him again. "Read it," I said. "Read what she wrote to you 17 years ago. The letter you never let her send. The one you tore up and burned in the backyard while she watched from the bedroom window. The one I found in pieces at the bottom of the burn barrel when I was 14. The moment I saw my grandmother shaking her head, refusing to defend him, I knew I'd already won. But what she whispered next made even my mother in that car across the street start crying. If you're not subscribed, you're going to miss the one sentence that broke 17 years of silence. Don't let that happen. Subscribe now because this family's secrets are just starting to surface. He stared at the envelope like it was a live snake. I put it back together, I continued, my voice steady and calm. Piece by piece. Took me 8 months. Some parts were too burned to read, but I got enough. Enough to understand what you did, enough to track her down, enough to bring her back. My grandmother was crying now, quiet, helpless sobs that shook her thin shoulders. Eleanor, my father said, turning toward her desperately. Eleanor, you knew she was gone. Tell her. Tell her I didn't do anything wrong. But my grandmother didn't speak. She just shook her head slowly, back and forth, like a pendulum counting down the seconds until everything fell apart. I walked to the front door and put my hand on the knob. Cold metal, solid, real. She's waiting for me, I said. We're leaving tonight. I just wanted you to see her first. That every lie you told me, every story you invented, it was all for nothing. My father's voice broke. Please. Please don't do this. I looked back at him one last time. I forgive you, I said quietly. And I watched those 3 words hit him harder than any insult ever could. I stepped out into the snow. My grandmother's sobs followed me onto the porch. My father shouted my name, once, twice, but I didn't turn around. The car door opened. The woman, my mother, stepped out into the cold. Hello, baby, she said, and her voice cracked. I walked into her arms and let her hold me. Over her shoulder, I could see my father standing in the doorway. The Christmas lights blinked behind him. The snow fell between us like a curtain closing. My mother opened the passenger door, and I climbed inside. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Are you sure? She asked finally. I thought about the envelope still lying on his floor. About 17 years of silence. I'm sure, I said. She nodded, put the car in drive. And as we pulled away, I looked back one more time. My father had collapsed onto the porch steps. And I realized I wasn't running away. I was running toward something, toward truth, toward the mother I'd been told was dead, toward a life that wasn't built on lies. The car turned the corner. The house disappeared. My mother reached over and took my hand. There's so much I need to tell you, she said. About why I left. About what he did. I looked at her. At this stranger who was also my mother. I've been ready my whole life, I said. But what I didn't know was that my father was already on the phone, already setting in motion a plan that would hunt us down, because men like him don't let go easily. And the envelope I'd left on his floor? It didn't just contain my mother's letter, it contained something else. Something that would destroy him completely if he didn't find me first. The highway stretched out before us like a black ribbon unspooling into darkness. My mother drove with both hands gripping the steering wheel, her knuckles pale under the dashboard lights. We'd been driving for 40 minutes and she hadn't said a word since we left my father's house. Just the hum of the engine, the whisper of tires on wet pavement, the occasional swish of windshield wipers clearing away melting snow. I kept my eyes on the side mirror, watching the road behind us, waiting for headlights that never came, waiting for my father to chase us down like I knew he would eventually. But the road stayed empty, just darkness and the faint glow of distant streetlights fading into nothing. My mother finally broke the silence. I need to tell you something before we get where we're going. Her voice was soft but steady, like she'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her head. Something your grandmother said to me the last time I saw her. The night before I disappeared. I turned to look at her profile, the sharp line of her jaw, the way her eyes stayed fixed on the road like if she looked at me she might lose her nerve. "What did she say?" I asked. My mother's throat moved as she swallowed. "She told me that if I loved you, I'd leave. That if I stayed, your father would make sure I never saw you again anyway. And it would be worse. So much worse." The heater rattled softly. Outside, snow had turned to rain. Fat drops hit the windshield and slid sideways in the wind. "Why would Grandma Eleanor say that?" I asked, though part of me already knew. My mother glanced at me then, just for a second, and I saw tears balanced on her lower lids, threatening to spill. "Because she was trying to protect you," she said quietly. "From him. From me. From the truth about what our family really was." She pulled off the highway onto a narrow exit ramp, the kind that led to nowhere. Small towns with one gas station and a diner that closed at 8. Places where people disappeared and nobody asked questions. We drove past a rusted water tower and a shuttered grocery store, past houses with dark windows and cars sitting on cinder blocks in overgrown yards. Finally, she turned onto a gravel road that cut through a dense stretch of woods. Branches scraped the roof of the car. The headlights caught eyes in the darkness, a deer maybe, or a raccoon, something watching us pass. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Somewhere safe," she said. "Somewhere he'll never think to look." I didn't know it then, but the place my mother was taking me held the answer to every question I'd ever had about why my father hated me. And if you think you know where this is going, you don't. Subscribe now because what I found in those woods changed everything I thought I knew about my own blood. The road ended at a small cabin. It sat in a clearing surrounded by tall pines, their branches heavy with snow that hadn't melted yet this far from the city. A single porch light glowed yellow above the front door. Smoke curled from the chimney. Someone was inside, waiting. My mother put the car in park but didn't turn off the engine. She just sat there, staring at the cabin like it was a ghost. "Who lives here?" I asked. She closed her eyes, took a long, shaky breath. "Someone you need to meet," she said. "Someone your father made sure you never knew existed." Before I could ask what that meant, the cabin door opened. A figure stepped out onto the porch. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a faded denim jacket and work boots. A man. He stood under the porch light with his hands in his pockets, watching our car with an expression I couldn't read from this distance. My mother finally turned off the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. "Who is that?" I whispered. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that made my stomach drop. Guilt. Deep, soul-crushing guilt. "That's your uncle," she said. "My brother. The one your father told you died in a car accident when you were 3. I stared at her, then at the man on the porch, then back at her. "What?" My voice came out flat, numb, because I couldn't process what she'd just said. "His name is Marcus," my mother continued, her words coming faster now. "He's 2 years older than me. He was there the night you were born. He was there when your father and I got married. He was there for everything, until the day your father decided he wasn't allowed to be part of our lives anymore." She unbuckled her seatbelt, turned to face me fully. "Your father didn't just erase me from your life. He erased everyone who might have helped you see the truth. Everyone who might have protected you from him. Marcus tried to stop him, tried to fight for custody of you after I left. And your father made sure he'd never succeed." The man on the porch, Marcus, took a step forward, then stopped, like he wasn't sure if he should come closer or wait for us to come to him. "How?" I asked. My hands were shaking now. I pressed them flat against my thighs to make them stop. "How did he make sure?" My mother's voice dropped to almost a whisper. He filed a restraining order, claimed Marcus was dangerous, unstable, a threat to you. He falsified police reports, got people to lie in court, and because your father was respected in town, because he had friends in the right places, everyone believed him. She reached over and took my hand. Her palm was warm and slightly damp. Marcus lost everything fighting for you, his job, his savings, his reputation. And in the end, the court ruled that he wasn't allowed within 500 feet of you, ever. If he violated that order, he'd go to prison. I looked out at the man on the porch, at this stranger who was supposed to be my uncle, who'd supposedly died when I was too young to remember him. Why didn't you tell me? My voice cracked. Why didn't you fight harder? My mother's tears finally spilled over, ran down her cheeks in silent streams. Because I thought I was protecting you, she said. I thought if I disappeared, if I stayed away, your father would calm down, would treat you better, would let you have a normal life. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her cheekbone. I was wrong. I know that now. I was so wrong. And I've spent every day of the last 17 years regretting that choice. But I can't undo it. All I can do is try to make it right now, starting tonight. The cabin door opened wider. A woman stepped out beside Marcus, older, maybe in her 60s. She wore a thick cardigan and held a mug of something steaming. Who's that? I asked. That's Ruth, my mother said. Marcus's partner. She's been helping him search for me for years. She's the one who found me 6 months ago. 6 months. My mother had known where I was for 6 months, had been planning this for 6 months, and I'd had no idea. Come on, my mother said gently. They've been waiting a long time to meet you. I followed her out of the car. My legs felt weak, unsteady. Marcus came down the porch steps slowly, carefully. When he got close enough for me to see his face clearly, I gasped. He looked like me, same dark eyes, same sharp cheekbones, same widow's peak at the hairline. Hey, kid, he said quietly. His voice was rough, emotional. I've wanted to meet you for a very long time. I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there in the rain that was starting to fall harder now. Ruth came down the steps behind him. She smiled at me, a warm, genuine smile. You must be freezing, she said. Come inside, I made soup, and we have a lot to talk about. My mother put her hand on my shoulder, squeezed gently. It's okay, she said. You're safe here, I promise. But I didn't feel safe. I felt like the ground had opened up beneath me and I was falling through layers of lies. We walked into the cabin. It was small but warm. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace. Bookshelves lined the walls. It smelled like coffee and old paper and safety. Ruth gestured to the couch. Sit, please. I sat. My mother sat beside me. Marcus took the chair across from us. Ruth disappeared into what I assumed was the kitchen. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The fire popped and hissed. Finally, Marcus leaned forward, rested his elbows on his knees, looked me straight in the eye. I know this is overwhelming, he said. I know you have a million questions, but first, there's something you need to see. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a photograph. Old, faded, the edges worn soft. He held it out to me. I took it with trembling fingers. The photograph showed a young couple. The woman was my mother, younger, smiling, radiant. She wore a white dress and held a bouquet of wildflowers. Beside her stood a man. Not my father, someone else. Tall, handsome, kind eyes. He had his arm around my mother's waist, and he was looking at her like she was the only person in the world. Who is this? I asked, though part of me already knew. My mother's voice was barely a whisper. That's Thomas, my first husband. The man I married 3 years before I met your father. The man I loved more than anything. She paused, swallowed hard. And the man your father killed. The photograph slipped from my fingers and landed face up on the coffee table. I stared at it, at my mother's smile, at the stranger's kind eyes, at the happiness that radiated from both of them like light. The word killed echoed in my head, over and over, a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. What? I finally managed to say. Just that one word. Because nothing else would come out. My mother picked up the photograph with shaking hands, traced her finger along the edge like she was touching something holy, something lost. Thomas was a good man, she said softly. He was a teacher, 10th grade English. He loved books and terrible puns and hiking in the mountains. We got married right after college. We were going to have children, buy a house, build a life together. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face now. And then I met your father. Marcus stood up abruptly, walked to the window, pressed his forehead against the glass. His shoulders were rigid, tense. Tell her the rest, he said, his voice hard. She deserves to know everything. My mother nodded, set the photograph down gently, took a deep breath. Your father was a mechanic at the garage where Thomas took our car to get fixed. He was charming, attentive. He started staying late just to talk to me when I came to pick up the car, started showing up at the coffee shop where I worked on weekends. She closed her eyes. Thomas and I were going through a rough patch. Money was tight. We were fighting more. I was lonely. And your father, he saw that. He knew exactly how to exploit it. So when he asked me to dinner one night, I said yes. Ruth came back into the room carrying a tray with mugs of soup and coffee. She set it down on the table without a word. Just gave my mother an encouraging nod and sat down in the chair Marcus had vacated. I told Thomas about the dinner, my mother continued. I felt guilty. I wanted to be honest. And he forgave me. Said we'd work through it. Said we'd go to counseling. Her voice broke. But your father didn't stop. He kept showing up, kept calling. And when I finally told him to leave me alone, that I loved my husband and wasn't interested, he smiled. This cold, empty smile. And he said, "We'll see about that." The fire crackled. Rain lashed against the windows. I wrapped my hands around a mug of soup I didn't remember picking up. The warmth seeped into my palms, but I still felt cold. 3 weeks later, my mother said, Thomas died in a car accident. His brakes failed on the mountain road coming home from work. He went through the guardrail and down a ravine. The police said it was mechanical failure, poor maintenance, bad luck. She looked at me with eyes that were empty, hollowed out by grief that had never healed. But it wasn't an accident. It was murder, and I knew it. I knew it the moment they told me he was gone. Because your father was a mechanic. He knew exactly how to make brakes fail, and he'd been alone with Thomas's car the week before. Marcus turned from the window. His face was pale, drawn. I tried to get the police to investigate, he said. Tried to get them to look at your father, but there was no evidence, no proof, just suspicion. And your father had an alibi. He was at work when it happened, surrounded by witnesses. He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Of course he was, because he'd done the work days earlier. All he had to do was wait. I set the mug down. My hands were shaking too hard to hold it. Mom, I whispered. If you knew, if you really believed he killed Thomas, why did you marry him? Why did you have me? My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Because I was pregnant, she said simply. 2 months after Thomas died, I found out I was carrying you. And your father, he showed up at my door, told me he'd take care of me, told me he loved me, and wanted to give me the family I'd lost. She wiped her eyes. I was grieving. I was terrified. I was alone. My parents were dead. Marcus was across the country. I had no money, no support. And your father, he was so convincing, so persistent. Her voice dropped to a whisper. So I said yes. I married him 6 months after Thomas died. I let him give you his last name. And by the time I realized what I'd done, by the time I understood that he hadn't saved me, he'd trapped me, it was too late. At that moment, I realized I wasn't just my father's daughter. I was the reason my mother stayed in hell. I was the chain that kept her locked to a murderer. And if that doesn't make you understand why revenge isn't just about anger, it's about freedom, then you haven't been paying attention. Subscribe, because what I did with this information destroyed my father in ways he never saw coming. Ruth leaned forward. Her voice was gentle but firm. Your mother tried to leave multiple times. When you were 2, when you were 5, when you were 8. Every time your father found her, dragged her back, threatened to take you away. She glanced at my mother. The last time she tried, when you were 10, he broke her wrist, told her if she ever tried again, he'd do worse, and he'd make sure you watched. I felt sick, actually sick. My stomach churned. Why didn't you go to the police? I asked. Marcus made a harsh sound. She did. Multiple times. I did too. But your father was smart. He never left marks where people could see them. He was respected in the community, coached Little League, volunteered at the church. Everyone loved him. He came back to his chair, sat down heavily. The system failed her, failed you. And when I tried to fight for custody after your mother finally escaped, your father used every connection he had to paint me as the dangerous one. My mother's voice was steady now, calm. So I left. I disappeared. I changed my name. I moved 6 states away. And I waited. I waited for you to be old enough to find me, to understand, to choose. She looked at me. And you did. You found that letter. You put it back together. You tracked me down. And I swear to you, I will spend the rest of my life making sure your father never hurts anyone ever again. I stood up, walked to the fireplace, stared into the flames. My whole life had been a lie. The envelope, I said quietly. The one I gave him. What was in it? Marcus reached into his jacket again, pulled out a folded piece of paper, handed it to me. I unfolded it. It was a photocopy, the original letter my mother had written 17 years ago. But there was something else. At the bottom, in my handwriting, a single sentence. I know what you did to Thomas, and soon everyone else will too. I looked up at my mother. You added that? She asked. I nodded. 3 days ago, after I found you. After we talked on the phone and you told me everything. I wanted him to know. I wanted him to be afraid. Marcus smiled. Actually smiled. It was grim. Dangerous. Good, he said. Because tomorrow, we're going to the police. We're going to give them everything. The letter. The photographs. The records. All of it. He leaned forward. And we're going to make sure that when your father's world comes crashing down, there's nothing left for him to stand on. Ruth stood up, went to a desk in the corner, came back with a thick manila folder. She set it on the coffee table. We've been building a case for 5 years, she said. Ever since Marcus found your mother, collecting evidence, tracking down witnesses. She tapped the folder. This is enough to reopen Thomas's case, enough to investigate your father for murder, enough to take away his freedom the way he took away your mother's. I stared at the folder, at 17 years of pain compressed into paper and ink. When? I asked. Tomorrow morning, Marcus said. 9 a.m. We have an appointment with a detective who specializes in cold cases. He stood up, walked over to me, put his hand on my shoulder. But only if you're ready. Only if you understand that once we do this, there's no going back. Your father will know you betrayed him. He'll fight back. It will get ugly. I thought about my father's face when he saw my mother's car, about the envelope still lying on his living room floor, about 17 years he'd spent lying to me. I'm ready, I said, and I meant it. My mother stood up, pulled me into a hug, a real hug. Thank you, she whispered into my hair. Thank you for being braver than I ever was. We stood there for a long moment, the fire warming our backs, the rain falling outside, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But then headlights swept across the window. Marcus froze. Ruth moved to the window, pulled back the curtain just an inch. We have company, she said quietly. My mother's grip on me tightened. Who is it? Marcus was already moving, pulling something from a drawer. A phone. He checked the screen, checked the security camera feed, and his face went white. It's him, he said. It's your father, and he's not alone. Would you have gone to the police, or would you have run? Tell me in the comments, because what happened next made me realize that some men don't wait for the law to catch them. They come for you first. I'm reading every single comment because I need to know if I made the right choice in what I did next. The headlights didn't move. They just sat there at the end of the gravel driveway, high beams cutting through the rain like searchlights. Two vehicles. My father's truck and another car I didn't recognize. Marcus moved fast. He grabbed the manila folder from the coffee table and shoved it into Ruth's hands. Back room, now. Lock the door. If anything happens, you call Detective Morrison. Tell him everything. Ruth didn't argue. She just took the folder and my mother's arm and started pulling her toward the hallway. But my mother resisted, pulled back. I'm not leaving her, she said. Her voice was steel. Not again. Never again. Marcus looked at her, then at me, then back at the headlights that still hadn't moved. Fine, Marcus said, but you stay behind me, both of you, and if I tell you to run, you run, understand? My mother nodded. I did too, though I wasn't sure my legs would work if I needed them to. Ruth disappeared down the hallway. I heard a door close, a lock click. Marcus went to the window, stayed to the side where he couldn't be seen, watched. He's just sitting there, Marcus said quietly. Why isn't he moving? My mother's hand found mine, squeezed tight. Her palm was slick with sweat. He's waiting, she said. That's what he does. He waits until you're afraid, until you make the first mistake. Then he attacks. I thought about all the times my father had done exactly that. Silent dinners where the tension built until I said something wrong. Long car rides where he wouldn't speak until I apologized for things I didn't do. He was a hunter, and he knew how to make his prey panic. We should call the police, I said. Now, before he does anything. Marcus shook his head. We call the police and he'll say he's worried about his daughter, that she ran away with her unstable mother. And because you're 17, they'll side with him. He glanced at me. We need him to make the first move, to do something that proves he's the danger. My mother made a small sound. That's too risky. He won't get inside, Marcus interrupted. I won't let that happen. The driver's door of my father's truck opened. I saw his silhouette in the headlights. Tall, broad, moving with that deliberate slowness that meant he was in control. He stood beside his truck for a moment. Then he reached back inside and pulled something out. I couldn't see what it was from this distance. Something long, metallic. My stomach dropped. Is that a gun? I whispered. Marcus's jaw clenched. Baseball bat? He keeps one behind the seat. Somehow that was worse. A gun was distance, quick, but a bat meant he wanted to get close, wanted to feel the impact. The passenger door of the sedan opened. Another man got out. Shorter than my father, stockier. He wore a jacket with a hood pulled up against the rain. "Who's that?" my mother asked. Marcus squinted. "Don't know, but your ex has friends in low places." I was standing in a cabin in the middle of nowhere watching my father advance with a weapon and a stranger, and all I could think was that this was my fault. I'd pushed him too far. If you think you know how this ends, you're wrong. Subscribe now, because what my father said when he reached that porch made me realize he'd been planning this moment for 17 years. My father started walking toward the cabin. Slow, steady, the bat resting on his shoulder. The other man followed a few steps behind. My mother's breathing got faster, shallow. I could feel her pulse hammering where our hands were joined. "Marcus," she said, just his name. But it carried everything. 17 years of fear. Marcus moved away from the window, positioned himself in front of the door. "When he knocks, I'll talk to him through the door. Keep it locked. Keep him outside. And I'll record everything on my phone, every threat, every admission." He pulled out his phone, opened the voice recorder, set it on the small table by the door. My father's boots sounded on the porch steps. Heavy, deliberate. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then his footsteps crossed the porch, stopped right in front of the door. Silence. Long enough that I thought maybe he'd changed his mind. Then he knocked. 3 times, hard. The sound echoed through the cabin like gunshots. "I know you're in there, Marcus," my father said. His voice was calm, almost friendly. That made it worse somehow. "I know you've got my wife and my daughter, and I'm asking nicely. Send them out. We'll forget this whole thing happened." Marcus didn't respond, just stood there, waiting. My father knocked again, harder this time. "I said I know you're in there. I can see the smoke from your chimney. I can see the lights on. So let's be adults about this. Open the door. Let's talk." Marcus finally spoke. "There's nothing to talk about. They don't want to see you. You need to leave, now." My father laughed, low, bitter. "They don't want to see me, that's rich. Is that what my daughter told you? After everything I've done for her? After 17 years of putting a roof over her head?" His voice changed, got harder, sharper. "You don't know anything about my family. You've been legally prohibited from contact for over a decade. You're violating a court order right now, and when the police get here, you're the one who's going to jail." "Then call them," Marcus said. "Call the police. Right now. Let them sort this out." Silence. My father didn't call anyone, because he couldn't. "Open the door, Marcus." My father's voice was different now. All pretense of civility gone. Just cold rage. "The door stays closed," Marcus said. "And if you try to break in, that's home invasion. That's assault." My father slammed something against the door. The bat, probably. The whole frame shook. My mother flinched, pressed herself against the wall. "You think you're smart?" my father shouted. "You think you can steal my family and hide out here and I won't do anything about it?" Another slam, harder. The door rattled but held. "I know what you're planning. I know about your little folder. Your evidence. Your police detective. You think I'm stupid? You think I didn't have people watching you?" He laughed again, wild, unhinged. "I've known about your investigation for 2 years. 2 years. And I've been dismantling it piece by piece, discrediting your witnesses, destroying your evidence, making sure that when you finally made your move, you'd have nothing." My mother's hand went to her mouth. "No," she whispered. But Marcus's face said otherwise. Said maybe my father was telling the truth. "So here's what's going to happen," my father said. His voice was calm again, controlled. "You're going to open this door. You're going to hand over my wife and daughter. And you're going to forget any of this ever happened. Because if you don't, I'll make sure you spend the next 10 years in prison." He paused. "And while you're rotting in a cell, I'll make sure my daughter understands exactly what happens to people who try to take her away from me." Right then, with my father threatening to destroy the only family I had left, I did something I'd been planning since the moment I found that letter. Something I'd kept secret even from my mother. And when my father heard my voice come through that door, I watched 17 years of control shatter in a single sentence. "If you're not subscribed, you'll miss the moment I turned his own weapon against him. Do it now." I pulled away from my mother, walked to the door. Marcus tried to grab my arm, but I slipped past him. I stood right up against the wood, close enough that my father would hear every word clearly. "You're wrong about one thing, Dad," I said. My voice was steady, stronger than I felt. "You don't know everything we've been planning. You don't know what I've been doing for the last 3 years. And you definitely don't know what I did before I left your house tonight." Silence on the other side of the door. Then, "What are you talking about?" I smiled even though he couldn't see it. "Remember that burn barrel where you destroyed Mom's letter? The one in the backyard behind the garage? The one you thought nobody ever looked in?" I heard his breathing change. Faster, shallower. "I've been collecting things from that barrel for 3 years," I continued. "Every time you burned something you didn't want anyone to find, I was there the next day, digging through the ashes, saving the pieces." My mother was staring at me, eyes wide. She hadn't known. Nobody had known. "Bank statements showing payments to people who lied for you in court," I said. "Letters from your lawyer discussing how to falsify police reports, photographs you took of Mom's bruises that you kept as insurance, medical records you stole from the hospital. All of it. Burned, but not destroyed." I pressed my palm against the door. "And I cared, Dad. I cared so much that I spent 3 years of my life piecing together your crimes, scanning every document, uploading every photograph, creating a digital archive of everything you've done." The other man on the porch said something I couldn't hear. My father told him to shut up. "You're lying," my father said, but his voice shook. "No, I'm not," I said. "And if you don't believe me, check your email, the one you use for your business. I sent you a sample about an hour ago." I heard movement on the porch, frantic rustling, my father checking his phone probably, then silence, long, heavy, broken only by the rain and the sound of my father's ragged breathing. "Where is it?" he finally said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Where's the rest of it?" "Safe," I said. "Encrypted. Uploaded to 3 different servers. Set to auto-send to multiple recipients if I don't check in every 12 hours. Recipients including the police, the district attorney, several journalists, and a true crime podcaster with about 2 million listeners." I let that sink in. "So if anything happens to me, to Mom, to Marcus, to anyone in this cabin, the whole world learns what kind of man you really are. Every crime, every lie, and you spend the rest of your life in prison." The baseball bat hit the porch, clattered and rolled. I heard my father's knees hit the wood, heard him making sounds that might have been sobs, or might have been rage. "You destroyed me," he said. "No," I said quietly. "You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone would finally see it." Marcus put his hand on my shoulder, squeezed gently, proud. I stepped back from the door. "You should leave now, Dad," I said. "You should go home. Pack your things. Maybe talk to a lawyer. Because tomorrow morning, we're going to the police with everything." Footsteps on the porch, stumbling, uneven. My father's voice came one more time. Broken, defeated. "I gave you everything. I raised you when she abandoned you. And this is how you repay me?" I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. The footsteps retreated. Car doors opened and closed. Engines started. And slowly, the headlights pulled back down the gravel driveway and disappeared into the darkness. For a long moment, nobody in the cabin moved. Then Marcus exhaled, long and shaky. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," he said. Ruth emerged from the back room, still holding the folder. "You've been planning this for 3 years?" she asked. I nodded. "Since I was 14, I didn't know what I was going to do with it all. I just knew I had to save it." My mother pulled me into another hug, this one tighter, more desperate. "You saved us," she whispered. "You saved all of us." But I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt tired. "He'll come back," I said. "Maybe not tonight, but eventually." Marcus nodded grimly. "Then we need to move fast. First thing tomorrow, we go to Detective Morrison. We hand over everything." He looked at me. "Are you ready for that? Once we do this, your life changes forever. Your name will be in the news. You won't be able to hide from it." I thought about my father's house, about 17 years of silence and fear. "I'm ready," I said. And this time, I knew I meant it. I didn't sleep that night. None of us did. We sat in the living room of Marcus's cabin watching the windows, listening for the sound of tires on gravel, waiting for my father to come back with reinforcements or rage or some plan we hadn't anticipated. But the night stayed quiet. Just rain and wind and the occasional crack of branches in the woods. When dawn finally came, gray and cold, Ruth made breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast and coffee that tasted like burnt hope. We ate in silence, everyone too exhausted or anxious to make conversation. At 8:30, Marcus stood up. "Time to go," he said. We piled into Ruth's SUV. Marcus drove. Ruth sat passenger. My mother and I sat in the back, her hands still gripped tight in mine, like if she let go I might disappear again. The drive to town took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of winding mountain roads and scattered farms and small houses that looked peaceful in the early morning light. We pulled into the parking lot of the police station at exactly 9 a.m. It was a small building, brick, American flag hanging limp in the misty rain. 3 police cruisers parked in front. Detective Morrison was waiting for us inside. He was older than I expected, maybe late 50s, gray hair cropped close, kind eyes that had seen too much and somehow stayed kind anyway. He shook Marcus's hand, nodded to Ruth, looked at my mother with something like recognition. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said gently, "I remember you. You filed a report about 12 years ago. Domestic dispute. Your husband convinced everyone you were unstable." My mother's voice was barely a whisper. "You believed me?" "I believed something was wrong," he said. "I just couldn't prove it. Not then." He looked at me. "You must be the daughter." I nodded. "I have evidence. A lot of it." Detective Morrison gestured toward a hallway. "Then let's talk. I've got a conference room set up. We can go through everything. Take as long as you need." We followed him down a corridor that smelled like coffee and industrial cleaner, into a room with a long table and uncomfortable chairs and a recording device set up at one end. Sitting in that police station about to expose my father's crimes, I realized this was the moment that would define the rest of my life. Either I was about to get justice, or I was about to learn that the system protects monsters better than it protects their victims. If you want to know which one it was, you need to subscribe, because what Detective Morrison said after reviewing my evidence made me understand why some cases take 17 years to solve. Marcus set the manila folder on the table. I pulled out my phone and opened the encrypted files I'd spent 3 years compiling. Detective Morrison sat across from us. Pulled out a notepad, clicked a pen. "Start from the beginning," he said. So we did. My mother told her story first, about Thomas, about the car accident that wasn't an accident. about my father's obsession and manipulation, and the way he'd trapped her in a marriage built on murder and fear. Detective Morrison listened without interrupting, took notes. His expression never changed, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or recognition. Then Marcus told his part. About the restraining order, about the falsified police reports, about losing everything trying to save a niece he wasn't allowed to see. Ruth added details. Names of witnesses who'd been threatened or paid off. Dates of hospital visits. Records she'd obtained that proved my father had lied under oath. And then it was my turn. I opened my phone, pulled up the archive. 3 years of work organized into folders by date and crime. This is everything I found in my father's burn barrel, I said. Bank statements, letters, photographs, medical records. I started collecting it when I was 14. I didn't know what it all meant at first. I just knew it was important. I handed the phone to Detective Morrison. I scanned everything, uploaded it, created backups. I was going to wait until I turned 18, but then last night, he showed up at Marcus's cabin with a baseball bat, and I realized I couldn't wait anymore. Detective Morrison scrolled through the files. His expression changed. The professional neutrality cracked. His jaw clenched. His eyes went hard. "This is substantial," he said quietly. "This is enough to open multiple investigations: fraud, perjury, conspiracy, assault, possibly even murder if we can make the case about your mother's first husband." He looked up at me. "You did this yourself? All of it?" I nodded. "I didn't have anyone else, so I just collected everything, waited, and when I finally found Mom 6 months ago, I knew it was time." Detective Morrison set the phone down, leaned back in his chair. "I'm going to be honest with you. Building a case against someone like your father, someone with community ties and a clean public image, it's going to be difficult. His lawyers will fight every step. They'll claim you manipulated these documents." He paused. "But between what you've collected and what we can corroborate with official records, we have a shot, a real shot. It's going to take time, months, maybe years. But if you're willing to see this through, if you're willing to testify, I think we can get justice." My mother squeezed my hand. "We're willing. Whatever it takes." Detective Morrison nodded. "Then here's what happens next. I'm going to get a warrant for your father's arrest. Might take a few days to process all this evidence, but with what you've given me, I don't think it'll be a problem." He looked at Marcus. "That restraining order against you? I'm going to start the process of getting it overturned. Given what we know now about how it was obtained, it shouldn't be difficult." Marcus nodded. "I've waited 17 years. I can wait a little longer." "I need you all to write out formal statements," Morrison said. "Everything you've told me, but in writing, signed and dated. And I'd recommend you all find somewhere safe to stay until we have your father in custody." Ruth spoke up. "We have a place. Friend of mine owns a cabin about 2 hours north. She's out of the country for the next month." "Perfect," Detective Morrison said. "Use it. Stay off social media. Don't contact anyone from your old life. Don't give your father any way to track you down." He looked at me. "That auto-send feature on your files, keep it active. But I want you to add me to the recipient list. If something happens and you can't check in, I want to make sure law enforcement gets those files immediately." I nodded, pulled up the settings on my phone and added his email address. We spent the next 4 hours writing statements, going over every detail, every date, every incident. My hand cramped from writing. My head ached from remembering. When we finally finished, it was almost 2 p.m. Detective Morrison walked us back to the parking lot. The rain had stopped. Pale sunlight broke through the clouds in patches. "I'll be in touch," he said. "Probably within 48 hours. In the meantime, stay safe. Stay together." He shook my hand. "You're brave. You know that? What you did, collecting all that evidence, protecting your family. Most kids your age are worried about prom. You took on a monster and won. I didn't feel like I'd won. Not yet. But I nodded anyway. We got back in the SUV. Marcus drove north, away from town, toward the cabin Ruth had mentioned. Nobody talked. We were all too drained. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't open it. Almost deleted it. But something made me click. The message was short. 2 sentences. You think you're so smart, but you forgot one thing. My blood went cold. Marcus, I said. Pull over. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror. What's wrong? I held up my phone, showed him the text. His face went pale. He pulled onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires. Ruth took my phone, read the message. It's him, she said. It has to be. My mother looked over my shoulder, started shaking. What did we forget? I thought back through everything we'd done, everything we'd said, everything I'd archived and uploaded and protected. And then it hit me. Grandma Eleanor, I said. My mother gasped. Oh, God. She's still at the house, I said. She's alone with him. And if he knows we went to the police. I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to. Marcus was already turning the SUV around, already speeding back toward town. Call Morrison, he said. Tell him to send someone to that house. Now. Ruth dialed, put the phone on speaker. Detective Morrison answered on the second ring. We think my grandmother might be in danger, I said before he could speak. She lives with my father. If he knows about the investigation. I'm on it, Morrison interrupted. Give me the address. I'll have officers there in 5 minutes. I rattled off the address. The house I'd grown up in. The place where my grandmother was probably sitting at the kitchen table, wondering why everything felt wrong. Stay where you are, Morrison said. Do not go to that house. That's an order. You go there and you put yourself in danger, and you potentially compromise this investigation. He hung up. Marcus kept driving anyway. I'm not waiting, he said. If something happens to Eleanor because we were too slow, I'll never forgive myself. My mother didn't argue. Neither did I. We reached the house in 20 minutes. 2 police cruisers were already parked out front, lights flashing, officers on the porch, the front door standing open. Marcus parked across the street. We all got out. An officer saw us and immediately walked over. You need to stay back, he said. This is an active scene. That's my mother in there, my mother said. Is she okay? Please, is she okay? The officer's expression softened. We found an elderly woman inside. She's unharmed. Shaken up, but unharmed. Paramedics are checking her out now. Relief flooded through me. My knees almost buckled. And my father? I asked. Where is he? The officer glanced back at the house. Not here. Neighbors say he left about an hour ago, packed a bag, got in his truck and drove off. We've issued a bolo. Every officer in 3 counties is searching for him. Marcus swore under his breath. He ran. Looks like it, the officer said. But we'll find him. It's only a matter of time. My grandmother appeared in the doorway. A paramedic had a blanket around her shoulders. She looked small, fragile, older than I'd ever seen her. When she saw us, she started crying. I ran to her. Didn't care about protocol or anything except getting to her. She pulled me into a hug, held me so tight I could barely breathe. I'm sorry, she kept saying. I should have protected you. I should have done more. It's okay, Grandma, I said. You're safe now. We're all safe. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Because my father was out there somewhere, running, desperate, dangerous. And desperate men did desperate things. Have you ever had to choose between safety and justice? Between hiding and fighting? Tell me in the comments what you would have done, because what happened over the next 3 days taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust that the truth will win. I'm reading and replying to every comment. My grandmother came with us to the cabin up north. She didn't want to. Kept saying she needed to stay at the house, that she had things to take care of. But my mother wouldn't let her argue. "You're coming with us," she said firmly. "I've lost you once. I'm not losing you again." So we all piled into the SUV. 5 people and whatever belongings we'd managed to grab in the chaos. The cabin Ruth's friend owned was smaller than Marcus's place. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that barely fit 4 people. But it was clean and warm, and most importantly, it was somewhere my father didn't know about. We settled in as best we could. Ruth and Marcus took 1 bedroom. My mother, grandmother, and I shared the other. That first night, my grandmother finally told us everything. We sat around the small kitchen table, drinking tea Ruth had made, watching the darkness press against the windows. "I knew what he was," my grandmother said quietly. "From the very beginning, I knew something was wrong with him. The way he looked at your mother, the way he inserted himself into her life after Thomas died. It wasn't love, it was obsession." She wrapped her hands around her mug, stared into the steam. I tried to warn her, tried to tell her to wait, to grieve properly, but she was hurting, and he was so convincing. And I thought maybe I was wrong. My mother reached across the table, took her hand. "It wasn't your fault." "It was," my grandmother insisted, "because even after you married him, even after I saw the bruises, the fear in your eyes, I still didn't do enough. I made excuses, told myself it would get better." She looked at me. Her eyes were red, exhausted. "And when you were born, I thought maybe that would fix things. Maybe having a child would soften him, but it just gave him another person to control. Another victim." I'd never seen my grandmother like this. She'd always been quiet, passive, but now she was angry, and somehow that made her seem stronger. "Why did you stay?" I asked, after Mom left. "Why did you stay with him?" My grandmother was quiet for a long moment. "Because of you. He said if I left, if I tried to take you, he'd make sure I never saw you again. He'd move, change your name, disappear." She wiped her eyes. "So I stayed. I became small. I tried to be there for you in whatever tiny ways I could. Birthday cakes, clean clothes, someone who didn't yell. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. But it was all I had." My grandmother had spent 17 years being a silent shield between me and my father's worst impulses, and I'd never even known. If you think one person can't make a difference, you're wrong. Subscribe, because what she did next proved that courage doesn't always look like fighting back, and sometimes it looks like staying. Sometimes it looks like surviving. Subscribe now. My mother was crying again. "I abandoned both of you." "You survived," my grandmother said firmly. "You got out. That took more courage than staying ever could. And you came back. That's what matters." We sat there in that small kitchen, 3 generations of women who'd been broken by the same man, and somehow we started to heal. The next morning, Detective Morrison called. Marcus put him on speaker so we could all hear. "We found your father," Morrison said. My stomach clenched. "What does that mean?" "He walked into the station this morning, alone, no lawyer, said he wanted to make a statement." Silence. Complete, stunned silence. "What?" my mother finally managed. "He's confessing," Morrison repeated, "to everything. Thomas's murder. The falsified police reports, the domestic abuse, the perjury, all of it. He's waiving his right to an attorney, refusing a deal. He just wants to tell the truth." I couldn't process it, couldn't make sense of it. Why? Why would he do that? I asked him the same thing, Morrison said. He said, and I quote, "Because my daughter was right. I destroyed myself. And I'm tired of pretending I didn't." He paused. He also asked if he could write you a letter. I told him I'd ask. You're under no obligation to read it. I looked at my mother, at my grandmother, at Marcus and Ruth. I don't want his letter, I said. I don't want anything from him. Understood, Morrison said. In the meantime, he's being held without bail. Given the severity of the charges and the flight risk, the judge agreed. He'll stay in custody until trial. What about Thomas's case? My mother asked. We're working on it, Morrison said. With your father's confession and the evidence you provided, we've reopened the investigation. It's not a guarantee, but we have a real shot at justice. He cleared his throat. There's one more thing. Your father's confession includes details about other victims, other women he stalked or harassed before you. We're reaching out to them now. If even half of what he's saying is true, he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. My mother made a small sound. Relief or grief or maybe both. Thank you, she whispered. We sat there in the living room, sunlight streaming through the windows, and tried to absorb what had just happened. My father had confessed, given up, surrendered completely. Why would he do that? I asked again. Marcus shook his head. Guilt, maybe. Or exhaustion. When you spend that much energy maintaining a lie, eventually it breaks you. My grandmother had a different theory. He wanted control, she said quietly. One last time. By confessing, by owning his crimes, he took away your power to expose him. He got to tell the story on his terms. She looked at me. Don't let him have that. Don't let him rewrite this as some kind of redemption. He didn't confess because he was sorry. He confessed because he lost. I thought about that. About my father sitting in an interrogation room, signing a confession, trying to control the narrative one last time. Maybe my grandmother was right. But it didn't matter. Because regardless of why he confessed, the result was the same. He was going to prison. We were free. Over the next week, we started building a new life. Marcus helped my mother file for divorce. Ruth connected my grandmother with a support group. I enrolled in online school so I could finish my senior year. We established routines, breakfast together, evening walks, long conversations about everything and nothing. We started to feel like a real family. My mother started therapy, then my grandmother, then me. We sat in small offices with kind strangers and unpacked 17 years of trauma. It was hard, painful. Some days I didn't want to go. But I went anyway. Because healing wasn't optional. It was necessary. One evening, about 3 weeks after my father's arrest, my mother and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was orange and pink and purple. Do you think we'll ever be normal? I asked. My mother considered that. I don't know if normal is the goal. I think maybe we just learn to live with what happened, to carry it without letting it crush us. She put her arm around me. But I think we'll be okay. Better than okay. Because we have each other. And we have the truth. And that's more than we've ever had before. I leaned into her. Let myself be held. Let myself feel safe. I'm glad I found you, I said. I'm glad you found me too, she whispered. And sitting there on that porch, surrounded by family who chose to fight for me, I realized something. My father had tried to destroy us, tried to erase my mother, isolate my uncle, control my grandmother, and break me. But he'd failed, because we were still here, still standing, still fighting, still building something beautiful out of the ashes. And that was the greatest revenge of all. Not hurting him back, not making him suffer, but surviving, thriving, becoming more than what he'd tried to make us. 6 months later, I stood outside the courthouse wearing a dress my mother had bought for me, dark blue, modest, the kind of thing that said, "I'm credible, please listen to me." My grandmother stood on one side, my mother on the other, Marcus and Ruth behind us, a wall of family, a wall of support. Detective Morrison met us at the entrance. "You ready?" he asked. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. The trial had been moved up. My father's lawyer had negotiated a plea deal. Guilty on all counts in exchange for the prosecution's recommendation of concurrent sentences rather than consecutive. He'd still spend the rest of his life in prison. But this way, there'd be no lengthy trial. No cross-examination, no media circus, just a formal hearing where the judge would accept the plea and hand down sentencing. We walked into the courtroom. It was smaller than I'd expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, rows of benches like church pews. A handful of people were already seated. Other victims my father had hurt. Journalists, court staff. We sat in the front row behind the prosecution's table. I could see my father's back. He sat at the defense table wearing an orange jumpsuit, his shoulders slumped, his hair grayer than I remembered. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The judge entered. We all stood. The bailiff announced the case, and the process began. The prosecutor read the charges. 17 counts, including murder, assault, perjury, fraud, and conspiracy. The judge asked my father how he pleaded. "Guilty, Your Honor." His voice was quiet, flat. "To all counts?" "Yes, Your Honor, to all counts." The judge nodded, made some notes. Then she looked up. "Before I hand down sentencing, I'm going to allow victim impact statements. If anyone wishes to speak, now is the time." My mother stood, walked to the podium set up in front of the judge. Her hands shook as she unfolded a piece of paper. "My name is Catherine Whitmore," she began, "and the defendant murdered my first husband, abused me for 17 years, and stole decades of my life. But he didn't break me." She looked directly at my father. "You failed. You didn't destroy me. You didn't destroy our daughter. You didn't win. And you will spend the rest of your life knowing that every terrible thing you did was for nothing, because we're free. And you never will be again." She folded the paper, walked back to her seat. The judge thanked her. Then she looked at me. "Does the minor victim wish to make a statement?" I stood. My legs felt like water. But I walked to that podium, looked at the judge, at the prosecutor, at the journalists with their notebooks, and finally, at my father. He was looking at me, really looking. And for the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't anger or control or contempt. I saw defeat. Complete, total defeat. "My name is Cassidy Whitmore," I said. My voice didn't shake. "And I'm 17 years old. For my entire life, the defendant has been the center of my world. Everything I did was about managing his moods, avoiding his anger, trying to be small enough that he wouldn't notice me." I paused, took a breath. "But he never loved me. He loved control. He loved power. He loved making people afraid. And when I finally understood that, I stopped trying to please him, and I started collecting evidence against him." Standing in that courtroom, telling my truth to a room full of strangers, while my father listened in silence, I understood what justice really meant. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was simply the truth being told and believed. If you're still watching, if you've stayed with me through this whole story, subscribe now, because what the judge said next changed everything, not just for me, but for every victim who thinks their voice doesn't matter. "I spent 3 years digging through ashes," I continued, "piecing together documents, building a case, and I did it because I knew that someday someone would listen. Someone would care. Someone would believe that a 17-year-old girl could tell the truth about her father and be taken seriously." I looked at my father. "You taught me that power comes from fear, but you were wrong. Power comes from truth, and the truth is that you're a murderer, an abuser, a liar, and now everyone knows it. And that's the legacy you've earned. I stepped away from the podium, sat back down. My mother took my hand, squeezed. The judge looked at my father. Does the defendant wish to make a statement before sentencing? My father stood slowly. He looked at his lawyer, who nodded. Then he turned to face me. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. His voice was hoarse, raw. I don't deserve it. What I did to Thomas, to Catherine, to Marcus, to my own mother, to you, there's no excuse. He paused. You were right about everything. I did kill Thomas. I did abuse your mother. I did lie in court. I did manipulate the system. And I did it all while pretending to be a good man. He looked at the judge. I'm pleading guilty because I'm tired of lying, tired of being the person I became, and because my daughter deserves to hear me say it out loud. I did this, all of it, and I'm sorry. He sat back down. The courtroom was silent. The judge made more notes. Then she looked up. I've reviewed the plea agreement. I've read the evidence. I've heard the victim statements. And I find the defendant's plea of guilty to be knowing and voluntary. She paused. On the charge of second-degree murder in the death of Thomas Chen, I sentence you to 25 years to life. On the charges of domestic assault, I sentence you to 15 years to run concurrently. On the charges of perjury and fraud, I sentence you to 10 years to run concurrently. And I'm recommending that you serve your sentence at a maximum security facility with no possibility of parole for 25 years. She brought down her gavel. Court is adjourned. Just like that, it was over. My father was led away in handcuffs. He didn't look back, didn't try to say goodbye, just shuffled out of the courtroom like a man already halfway to being forgotten. We stood outside in the courthouse plaza. Sunshine, fresh air, the sound of traffic and normal life continuing around us. Detective Morrison shook our hands. You did it. You got justice. Thank you, my mother said, for everything. He nodded and left. And then it was just us. Our small, battered, beautiful family. What now? I asked. My grandmother smiled, a real smile. Now we live. We build the life we always wanted. We stop being afraid. Marcus put his arm around Ruth. We're thinking about moving back to the city, opening that bookstore we always talked about. My mother looked at me. What do you want to do? College? Travel? It's your choice. For the first time in your life, it's completely your choice. I thought about that. About freedom. About possibility. I want to tell our story, I said. I want other people who are trapped like we were to know that they can get out, that they can fight back, that their voice matters. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera. I want to make a video, share what happened, be honest about how hard it was, but also how we survived. My mother hesitated. Are you sure? Once you put that out there, you can't take it back. I know, I said, but I'm tired of silence. Silence is what gave him power. I turned on the camera, looked into the lens, and I started talking. I told the whole story. From the $5 bill on my 17th birthday to the confession in the courtroom. I didn't leave anything out, didn't soften the edges. I just told the truth. And when I finished, when I uploaded that video and watched it go live, I felt something I'd never felt before. Peace. 3 days later, the video had 1 million views. Messages poured in from people all over the world. People who'd survived abuse. People who were still trapped. People who said my story gave them hope. I answered as many as I could, shared resources, listened, believed. A week after that, a publisher reached out. They wanted me to write a book, wanted to give me a platform to help other victims. I said yes, because this wasn't just my story anymore. It was everyone's story. Everyone who'd ever been silenced. Everyone who'd ever been told their pain didn't matter. And I wanted them to know they weren't alone. What would you do if you finally got justice after 17 years? Would you celebrate? Would you grieve? Would you try to forget? I chose to remember. I chose to share. I chose to make sure that my father's crimes became a lesson instead of a secret. If you've made it this far, if you've stayed with me through this entire journey, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. And if this story helped you, if it gave you courage or hope or just the knowledge that you're not alone, then please subscribe. Share this video, tell your story. Because silence protects abusers, truth protects victims. And together, we can make sure that no one else has to spend 17 years waiting for justice. I'm reading and replying to every comment under this post. Tell me your story. Tell me what you need. Because we're in this together now. And together, we're stronger than any monster who tried to break us. 6 months after the trial, I turned 18. We celebrated at Marcus and Ruth's bookstore. They'd opened it in a small town 2 hours from where I grew up. It was cozy, full of light, the kind of place that felt like a hug. My mother baked a cake, chocolate with vanilla buttercream. 18 candles this time. We sang, we ate, we laughed. And when it came time to blow out the candles, I closed my eyes and made a wish. Not for revenge, not for my father to suffer, not for the past to change. I wished for continued healing, for my family to stay strong, for other victims to find their voice, for justice to become more common than silence. I blew out the candles in one breath. Everyone cheered. And my grandmother leaned over and whispered, "I'm so proud of the woman you've become. Your father tried to break you, but instead, you broke the cycle. You saved us all." I hugged her tight, felt my mother's arms join in, then Marcus and Ruth, all of us together, all of us safe, all of us free. And I realized that this moment right here, was what revenge really looked like. Not destruction, not pain, but building something beautiful, something he could never touch, something that proved we were more than what he tried to make us. We were survivors, we were fighters, we were family. And that was the greatest victory of all. The moral of this story isn't that revenge is sweet, it's that truth is powerful, that silence protects the wrong people, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear. My father tried to erase my mother, tried to isolate my uncle, tried to silence my grandmother, tried to break me. But we're all still here, still standing, still telling our truth. And if you're in a situation like the one we escaped, please know this. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. You matter. Document everything. Reach out for help. Find your people. And when you're ready, fight back. Not with violence, not with cruelty, but with truth. Justice doesn't always come quickly. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it takes everything you have, but it's worth it. Freedom is worth it. And you deserve it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this journey. Now go tell your story. And let's make sure that silence never protects abusers again.